Welcoming guys to this late night presentation of the Basch Sports Top 25 poll. Make sure you guys watch and listen to this one as sort of a podcast kind of feel as I reveal my top 25 poll this week. Number 25, the Texas A&M Aggies putting up a very good fight against the Clemson Tigers, and very impressed with the Aggies. Kellen Mond throwing crazy on a secondary that is very questionable for Clemson, kind of exposed the weaknesses to Clemson, but the very little weaknesses that there is. And I thought that was the only way Texas A&M stays in that game was exposing that weakness. I wasn't thinking Kellen Mond would throw the ball nearly as well as he did, but he did prove me wrong. Even in the loss, I got Texas A&M moving up big. Number 24, UCF, and they mostly slipped yet again because of people in front of them, but a little bit too unimpressive play by UCF. I mean, 3 interceptions by Mackenzie Milton against South Carolina State. Not too impressive of a performance by Milton himself against South Carolina State. It'll be interesting to see how UCF picks things up as they have North Carolina coming up. They got FAU coming up as well, and I believe they have Pitt, if I'm not mistaken. So those 3 games will kind of be testament to UCF and see if they are legitimate this year, or at least going to be able to compete for second straight New Year's Six bowl berth. Number 23, I think this team is starting and trending on the right direction, the Houston Cougars. A lot of people want to talk about, I said Cougars, a lot of people are going to talk about Ed Oliver, but how about this offense getting into high stride against Arizona? Of course, the defense played very well, but De'Aaron King is starting to sling the ball, throw the ball a lot better. Courtney Larkin's guy to watch for at wide receiver. A very interesting team to watch for, to say the least, in the Houston Cougars, who make my top 25 poll for the first time this season, and this is the second team so far who make their inauguration in this year's top 25 poll. Number 22 is going to be Michigan State. The Spartans fall to 1-1, and I don't think they looked unimpressive. Defense definitely looked a lot better against an up-tempo offense than they have, but part of me is not really liking Michigan State after they blew a 13-3 lead in the fourth quarter, but that's a little bit of testament to the play calling by Herm Edwards and the good job by just not giving up on going after N'Keal Harry, no matter how much Michigan State was trying to lock him down. Great game plan by the Arizona State Sun Devils. Sparty has to go back to the drawing boards. If they want to compete in that East, they got to be able to figure out how to get, they couldn't move the ball against a very good defense in Arizona State, but I don't know if they're up to the task, or up to the level, I should say, of Wisconsin, even though they won't play Wisconsin, of Ohio State and Michigan specifically, and even Penn State. Penn State looked pretty good defensively, but we'll talk about the Nittany Lions soon. And the team who beat Michigan State jumps into the top 25 as a third team who makes their inauguration into my top 25 poll. The Arizona State Sun Devils up at 21. I really like what I saw. Manny Wilkins, ups and downs throughout that game, but ended with an up. And, I think that could possibly be the kind of a predicament to the season, is which Manny Wilkins is probably going to have some games that are good, some games that are bad, but you really got to hope that if Manny Wilkins is going to have bad moments, it's got to be within games rather than an entire game, so that way you don't drop entire games over that. And Arizona State definitely could win this Pac-12 South. Not a whole lot of competition, even though there is some competition that I think is a little bit stronger to watch out for. Number 20, the Michigan Wolverines, who's at 1-1, looked a lot better against Western Michigan. I picked them not to cover. I expected them to struggle, but man, they did something that they didn't do all year last year. I believe they didn't score 40 points all last year. They beat Western Michigan down 49-3, a very impressive performance after this Western Michigan team just put up a lot of yards and a lot of points against a decent Syracuse team. Number 19, the Boise State Broncos. Quietly just dominates UConn this week. Quietly in the late game, a late kick, they're just going to move up in the poll. I really like Boise State. It'll be very fun to see them as they go to, I believe they play Oklahoma State this week in a top 25 matchup in the AP poll. In fact, I can, fantastic things about technology. I can go ahead and look it up, and it will take about 10 seconds. But I really like what I see. Boise State's defense is solid. Okay, it kicks me out of the app, so maybe not. But I really like what I see. Boise State's defense looking very solid early in this season. And also their offense is catching stride completely. Gosh. Maybe I need to update the app. That just keeps kicking me out. All right, let's see. Indeed, it is this Saturday at 3:30 p.m. on ESPN. So, yeah, that'll be a fun game out in Stillwater. Number 18, the Oregon Ducks. Oregon makes their inauguration into my poll. And this is a fourth, even though they've been on the outside looking in this whole time. This is my fourth team this week making their inauguration. I think a lot of movement within the 20s and teens. You'll see kind of what I mean with that. But Oregon looking very good offensively. Justin Herbert having another good, solid game. This one against Portland State in a blowout win yet again. And, Oregon's doing what they got to do. The Oregon Ducks just really starting strong. And a lot of people are going to be high on Oregon in that Pac-12 North. And it'll be interesting now because Stanford got that big win against USC. And now a lot of people are going to be on the USC bandwagon here. It'll be interesting to see if people just kind of tag along with this as that out-of-conference schedule, as weak as it is, it caps off with San Jose State. Then all of a sudden they got Stanford at home and Cal on the road before they hit their bye week. Number 17, the Iowa Hawkeyes, and this is the fifth team making the inauguration into my top 25 poll. And Iowa looking very good on defense. Nathan Stanley doing what he needs to do to come away with a win. Not too impressive, though, in the first 2 weeks, but the defense is looking elite out there in Iowa, quietly making a lot of noise. And by what I mean by quietly making a lot of noise, I mean we're going to look at Iowa later in the season, and we're going to see this team who is brewing right now. It is brewing, and you see it against a solid and a very good Iowa State offense. Shut them completely down. So Iowa is a team to watch for. I got them winning the West this year. Iowa ranked number 17 this week, but no one else is talking about them. They're not even in the top 25, in fact. Number 16, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Let me tell you something about Notre Dame. I give them a lot of praise. For me, it's a lot of praise, at least, because I'm not sold on Notre Dame. And then they turn around and just lay an egg against Ball State. Barely beats them. Only beat them by 8. Not very impressed with Notre Dame after a win. Only, they beat Michigan 24-17. They beat Ball State 24-16. I mean, shoot. What is it, Notre Dame? Show up or don't. And that's what they decide to do. That's what it is with Notre Dame, is show up, play a big game against Michigan, or don't show up, and Ball State. Now, if they do that next week to a more talented Vanderbilt team with an experienced quarterback in Kyle Shermer, they're going to be on upset watch next weekend. The number 16 Notre Dame Fighting Irish, after trending up 4 spots, fall down 4 spots back to their original spot where I originally thought they were, and they're going to stay where I originally thought they were until they prove me wrong again, which they may this weekend, or they may prove me correctly. Number 15, the Virginia Tech Hokies, taking care of business. William and Mary, a lot of boring games this week too. Really two very entertaining games. Both I broadcasted Pitt and Penn State I thought would be entertaining. South Carolina, Georgia I thought would be entertaining. And Iowa, Iowa State I thought would be entertaining. Iowa State was entertaining, but you can kind of tell Iowa had control of that game throughout. And Pitt, Penn State blowout. South Carolina, Georgia blowout. What else can you say? 15 the Virginia Tech Hokies. 14 LSU. Taking care of business yet, just like Virginia Tech, kind of in the same boat as Virginia Tech. They're doing just fine. 14 LSU. 13 West Virginia again, taking care of business. They played Youngstown State. Well, all these teams playing poor teams. Taking care of business right there. 12 TCU. Taking care of business against a slightly better opponent, but still SMU, they did struggle early. SMU got off to a 9-0 start in that ball game on Friday night, but that was after a rain delay that delayed the game 2 hours almost on the dot. So can't really blame TCU too much there. I'm going to factor that in when it comes to ranking teams, and I don't think TCU is necessarily a bad team right now. Horned Frogs at 12. Number 11, the Washington Huskies. Washington has lost one game. They show up against North Dakota, get an easy win. But really nothing is going to change with my view on Washington until they play a meaningful opponent. And, don't they go to Rice-Eccles Stadium this weekend? I believe they do, in fact. Let's go ahead and pull it up real quick. And indeed, they... See? Oh, shoot. I keep clicking buy tickets. I don't mean to buy tickets. I want to go out to Eugene and watch Washington take on Oregon. Hey, I wouldn't be against that, actually, but even then, let's just avoid that. Okay, it's loading. And I am... Eggs gotta scroll down pretty heavy, huh? Yes, I am right. 10 p.m. on ESPN. I'll definitely be watching that one in Rice-Eccles Stadium. This is a chance for them to prove a lot to college football fans out there. They play a tough opponent in Utah that I'll talk about in a little bit. Number 10, Penn State. Don't worry, Utah's not on my top 10. But number 10, Penn State, facing adversity and going through a lot of issues after the Appalachian State game, and a lot of people just not high on Penn State, moving them down, including myself. Penn State showed something. They showed, hey, we're not going anywhere. That was a fluke, And maybe Pitt and Penn State was a fluke, but you know what? In that game, the 51-6 was not indicative of how close that game was, but it was still, not really all that close. So Penn State right here is showing a lot and showing what they needed to show to go on and get a big win overall. They play Kent State at home next week, which should be an easy win, but last time we said it should be an easy win with it against a solid Appalachian State team. I don't know if Kent State's as solid, but who knows? They stuck with Illinois and blew out Howard just this past weekend. Number 9, the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Isn't this a little bit too high? Are you drinking too much Kool-Aid here? No, I'm not, and here's why. I moved them down a spot, as a matter of fact, because last week I had them number 8. But I moved them down a spot. They didn't impress me as much as I thought they would, but they still looked very good defensively. Offense just still trying to get going after having that suspension to Nick Fitzgerald, which kind of just settling in like, okay, this is the first game back with Nick Fitzgerald. Let's go ahead and just settle in. And you know what? They took care of business. I'm not going to be too mad at it. They covered the spread. They did what they're expected to do against a Power 5 opponent that, arguably is worthy. Arguably, at least. But Mississippi State's a solid football team, a team to watch for sure. Number 8, Stanford Cardinals. Your business against USC, maybe one of the more impressive wins of the weekend. Not necessarily showing that they are an explosive team, but showing that they are a team that can win on defense. And they definitely showed that, only allowing 3 points, forcing a handful of turnovers by JT Daniels, and the Cardinal roll to a big win, 17-3 over the USC Trojans at home in Palo Alto. Number 7, Oklahoma. And Oklahoma got off to a very slow start against UCLA, and I kind of was working on that. I've been hearing more that Rodney Anderson is going to be out for the season. That is bad. But I was kind of just like watching that game, and I watched that game quite a bit. And, I was able to get the gist of, how that game was going. And it took them a little bit to get going, but they eventually got going. I think this offense really didn't do anything that I was necessarily too impressed by, but I also thought that, hey, look, this is a very good offense. This is a top-tier offense, one of the top 5 offenses probably in the country. So that kind of has to factor in, but these teams ahead of them, and Oklahoma looked better on defense, but come on, like, you're going to talk about Oklahoma looking good against UCLA on defense. Cincinnati looked good against UCLA on defense. Let's not get crazy here. If you wanted to put Oklahoma in your top 5 based on eight people, specifically based on their defense looks better, put Cincinnati in the top 10, why don't you? They beat UCLA with defense. Heck, put it just, you know what? I just asked if you want to use that logic against UCLA, put Cincinnati in the top 25. They beat UCLA by 9 points based on primarily defense. So let's go ahead and put Cincinnati, if we're just looking off of the defensive statistics that teams are putting up. And I know it's kind of ridiculous. Oklahoma is a way better team than Cincinnati, but you cannot be saying, hey, look, Oklahoma, we're going to continue to jump you above quality teams who got quality wins, who blew out teams this weekend just like you did. We're going to move you up based on you beating a name brand UCLA, even though they are 0-2 now with a loss at home to Cincinnati by 9. Number 6, Auburn, a much better team, I think, than Oklahoma, just more complete, a dominating defensive front, the secondary that I think will be very good at the end of the season, and this will be one of the top defenses after the secondary kind of gets a little bit more development after the departure of guys like Carlton Davis, for example, and Trey Matthews. So Auburn is the team that I think is going to be a dark horse for the college football playoff. No one's going to be really talking about Auburn after that Washington game until you hit, peaks into the season where we're going to start talking about Auburn. They may lose a game and they may lose 2 games, but I think they will still be a dark horse in the playoff, even as a 2-loss. They got a very tough schedule on the resume, and if Washington continues to win, which I think they need to have Washington continue to win and at least go 9-3 and be a top 15, top 20 team, you get that on your resume, then I think Auburn's got a strong argument to be a 2-loss team in the playoff. So dark horse right there. Number 5, the Wisconsin Badgers. Now is my volume completely up? Let's not go any further. I don't want you to see what I got. Yes, it is. All right. Hopefully you did not see that. But number 5, Wisconsin, looked very efficient against New Mexico. And look, everyone was saying New Mexico's going to, upset Wisconsin. They're going to stick with them and take this one down to the wire. I said, no, this is just what Wisconsin does. They were down 10-0 against Utah State last year on a Friday night, and they scored 59 straight points. You heard me correctly. 59 straight points, and they didn't score at all, I don't think, in the first quarter, and they went on and won 59-10. I wasn't worried one bit. I think Wisconsin's still a very good team, and they deserve to be in the top 5, and they don't deserve to get kicked out based on a slow start against New Mexico, which is a Wisconsin thing. That, last year they were a top 6, top 5 talent team, or at least a top 5, top 6 team a year ago, and they did that against Utah State. Number 4, Ohio State. Well, I guess the spoils are out there. Number 4, Ohio State, and I moved Ohio State down because they didn't do anything wrong against Rutgers. It has more to do with the teams ahead of them. Not really even Clemson as much as Georgia. I think they'll win just like a week ago from 2 to 4. Really 1 to 4 right now is very close. Although Alabama didn't look necessarily bad. There's no way I can say anyone's number 1 outside of Alabama. No one can. But I don't think it's really all that much of a difference between 1 and 4. And then you could throw a couple teams in there in between the 5 and 10 range. But, yeah, I think Ohio State, very impressive against Rutgers. Didn't do anything wrong. But let's talk about Clemson, who beat Texas A&M, who I think is a top 25 opponent. And let's give them the reward, the benefit of the doubt. They went on the road to the 12th man, Texas A&M, and they beat them. In Ohio State, if they beat TCU, and if it's impressive, look, this is probably going to change as Ohio State is basically playing a road game out there now. Ohio State's still going to get a lot of people in that stadium. Do not get me wrong. Ohio State's still going to get a lot of people in that ball, in Jerry's world out there, as they always do when they travel. But Clemson, on the other hand, though, they don't really have an impressive opponent. They got Georgia Southern at home. I mean, if it's a nail biter, and Ohio State should beat TCU. If it's a nail biter, it goes down to the wire. Ohio State doesn't cover the spread, and it's similar to what Clemson did to Texas A&M. I'll probably end up keeping Clemson, and this is just hypotheticals. I still got to see it. Maybe TCU's better than I think they are. Maybe they look a lot better than I think they are, just like Texas A&M looked better than I thought they were. But maybe TCU's not all that bad, and it really kind of depends on who has a better win at that point. And if you are getting to close, Ohio State did already win a conference game and beat 2 Power 5 opponents. I don't know. Or 3 Power 5 opponents at that point. I don't know. We're going to have to see. It all matters really what happens in AT&T Stadium out there in Arlington. Number 2, the Georgia Bulldogs. They looked very impressive against Jake Bentley in the South Carolina Gamecocks. Every time South Carolina looked like they were going to get back into the game in the first half and the early second half, Georgia just shut down and did not. They kind of had a little bit of a bend but don't break mentality until about halfway through the third quarter, and that's when Georgia just took off on both sides of the ball, and Georgia completely dominated and they looked like the complete better team than South Carolina, and I was for sure wrong. I'm going to take my lumps on this one. I was wrong on this pick as well as the Penn State and Pitt pick. Way wrong and way off. And look, my analysis on South Carolina and my analysis on Georgia were both wrong. That secondary looked very good for Georgia. That pass rush is deadly for Georgia, and South Carolina's pass offense isn't as good as I thought it was. Jake Bentley isn't quite as good as I thought he was. Kind of overrated him a bit. So it's very interesting to see Georgia here at 2. I do think that South Carolina is not a bad football team. I think they are going to be a solid 8-9 win team. And possibly a top 25 team when it's all said and done, losing to Georgia and Clemson, and maybe a game or two. Kentucky's looking pretty good, and we'll talk about them. But number 1, guys, Alabama, as I said, no one can really compete with Alabama right now when it comes to being the number 1 team. They just look the part. They just look like Alabama, and, it would be – I got to see it first. I got to see something happen. And Alabama has Texas A&M in a couple weeks. They got Ole Miss, this upcoming week. Back-to-back games. I don't think Ole Miss is really going to take Alabama to the test. I think Ole Miss is going to get exposed. For all of you guys who like Ole Miss, they're going to freaking allow 60 points to Alabama. I'm calling it right now. I think it's going to be a 63-6 game. Alabama's going to roll through, but Texas A&M is going to kind of show, I think, on the radar of they're either going to show one of 2 things. How good is Clemson? And we'll see these answers in the weeks following Alabama. This is a developing situation throughout the season with Texas A&M, Alabama, and Clemson. How good is Clemson? How good is Texas A&M? And how good is Alabama? Those three answers will be solved, but it's all going to be based on how Texas A&M does. So if Texas A&M goes and gets blown out against Alabama, but wins a bunch of games, and Clemson wins a bunch of games, Alabama is head over heels over everyone. That's the only way I'm going to really say they were head over heels over everyone. Let's say, though, that the Aggies, who I think is at home against Alabama this season, let's say that the Aggies, though, have a similar game to the Clemson game. They're clearly not head over heels. I think that's the only answer that can kind of be made is if Texas A&M comes away with a win or barely loses in similar fashion to Alabama. I think that's going to be the only way we get a conclusion in that game of where is Alabama compared to the rest of the country, mainly Clemson, which Clemson is kind of the rest of the country there. Looking impressive, though, is Alabama nonetheless. I think also you got to prepare for this scenario. Texas A&M gets beat down by Alabama and loses a bunch of games. Shows that Clemson is just not the real deal. Neither is Texas A&M. But, it's a developing situation, as I said. Teams under consideration, Miami falls out, and they just fall out. But this has more to do with the other teams. Miami, you cannot lose to LSU if you want me in there. But if you're talking about teams who I put in there, Arizona State, Iowa, Houston, teams like that, new assertions into the top 25, you can't lose to LSU and get blown out like that. Even though LSU is a quality team, you just cannot get specifically manhandled like you did. Boston College looking good early. Hawaii looking good early. I think they got a big game against Army. This will be a true testament to how good this Hawaii team is. If they lose this ball game, I'm not going to consider them probably ever again in the top 25 this season. But with Cole McDonald, I'm getting a little bit of Colt Brennan kind of feeling with Hawaii. Let's see if that kind of sticks. It's only 3 games for Hawaii because keep in mind they played week 0, so they've already played 3 games. It's only 3 games for the Rainbow Warriors. They got 10 more to go, 13 regular season games. Let's see and settle down. Let's see how good this Hawaii team is, and let's see how Hawaii does with that extra game on their schedule as well. Maryland right there did look pretty good against Bowling Green on the road, and they played Texas tough, and I put them in here mainly because of the teams that dropped out and teams that I can't consider, like Florida State, South Carolina, for example. Like Florida State, if you're considering Florida State or voting Florida State in the AP poll, there's one person who voted Florida State in the AP poll. What are you thinking? Are you watching the football games? That O-line is one of the worst O-lines in the Power 5. Iowa State right there as well, teams under consideration. I did not take them out, even though I had them at the 2nd spot. I only moved them down to the 5th spot out. And this is why, because Iowa State didn't look necessarily terrible. They looked pretty good on defense, was able to contain Nathan Stanley. And I think that offense just has a little bit of work to do, but this is going to be a different game, a different challenge for them to go against Oklahoma. This could go from a 13-3 loss against Iowa to a huge blowout, or was it 13-3? It might have been. I can't remember. To a huge shootout, I should say, not blowout, against Oklahoma. It'll be very interesting. It's a big test to see if Iowa State is a true team and to see if Oklahoma is as good as they hyped up to be. Kentucky is that 6th team out, breaks the streak, and I think Kentucky right now is playing a good brand of football, kind of proving me and the haters wrong. I'm not necessarily a hater. I'm an advocate for Kentucky getting a lot better. I thought the schedule didn't play for them. They had to go to Gainesville, and they won in Gainesville. So a very big win for the Kentucky Wildcats on the road at Florida. And now all of a sudden, South Carolina doesn't look as good as you thought they would. You already got past the Florida hump. Now what do you have competing against you? I guess Missouri. You got to beat Missouri. So it's really Kentucky, Georgia. A long shot, but if Missouri turns out to be very good, I really have problems with that secondary right now, and they struggled to get going against Wyoming, but I got problems. And Missouri's probably that next tier of teams out. I mean, there's one tier of teams, and it's very small, that I was really considering putting on this list and kind of considering for the top 25. Wasn't able to really fit them in here, and that was Utah, the Utahs of the world, the Dukes of the world, playing very good football out there in Durham. Um, yeah, I mean, teams like that, and very solid start to this college football season. I am ready for week 3, guys. I think this could possibly be the most entertaining week of the season. Let's take a look at what we got on the slate in week 3, as these teams are going to go ahead and take a lot of grudge matches, as I'm going to go ahead and get off of the screen share now. And tomorrow, guys, by the way, the week 2 recap and highlights video will be coming out. It's going to be a short video, yet again, recapping this past week. So it will be very, very fun as we kick off Thursday night on ESPN at 7:30, Boston College versus Wake Forest. I'll certainly think about watching and broadcasting possibly that game. Hartman from Last Chance U, or sorry, not Last Chance U, QB1 Season 2 is there. Syracuse hosts Florida State in what could be a very interesting game on ESPN. Oklahoma, Iowa State is definitely a game to keep an eye on at ABC. I think that one's a very impactful game. That kind of starts the day, gets everything going. UCF, North Carolina as well on ESPNU. That's another chance to possibly broadcast. Georgia Tech, Pitt, not as much love as I would give it if they would have both won. I think this is actually a little bit of an underrated game at 3 o'clock Eastern. Ohio versus Virginia, and this one's actually interesting because if Ohio wins this, I think they got a shot to go undefeated. And they still got Cincinnati on the horizon, and actually, did Ohio even win this past weekend? Let me check. Ohio Bobcats. Where are the Bobcats? Find them anywhere. Maybe they didn't even play. Yeah, I don't think they played. Oh well. Let me check. Yeah, they didn't even play. They just played Howard. They were off this week. Struggling against Howard, so I don't know. Maybe that was just a slow start for Nathan Rourke and that crew. So anyway, now also at 3:30 on ESPN is Boise State against Oklahoma State. That's the top 25 matchup on ABC. BYU against Wisconsin. BYU in the last couple weeks in a losing effort against Cal and a win against Arizona, showing that they got a lot of physicality. And that one, they could possibly stick around with Wisconsin. If they can physically match up with Wisconsin, that game could be very dangerous for the Wisconsin Badgers at home. People giving a lot of crap to Wisconsin for scheduling BYU a year ago, but this one, this year, it is not necessarily a gimme. Duke and Baylor on the road in Waco for Duke after losing Daniel Jones to the season. Baylor hosts and trying to show people really that they are back, kind of, not necessarily back, but at least a better team, more improved in the process of Matt Rule bringing Baylor back to prominence is underway. And Duke, on the other hand, trying to show, hey, look, we may have lost Daniel Jones, but we aren't a one-man team. And we may have lost a cornerback. We aren't a two-man team. We are a full, solid ACC football team, and we're going to show it. LSU Auburn on CBS. Excuse me. That's a big game. Big game in the SEC West. If LSU could come up with a win, that'll be ginormous. But I don't know how well Joe Burrow will do against that defensive front, which is clearly better than Miami's, in my opinion, after watching them for a couple weeks. USF at Illinois. Illinois and Lovie Smith trying to show a little bit of luster. They're 2-0. They're trying to get up to 3-0 and upset USF, which is probably going to be some pretty nice favorites in that ball game. That game played last year on a Friday night. This one's going to be on Saturday at 3:30. West Virginia at NC State. ESPNU, a sleepy kind of game, a game that could easily be overlooked. Watch out for Ryan Finley in a very dangerous passing attack for NC State. The defense might not be as good, though. Although I think the secondary is just as good as it was a year ago. But that game is kind of a game to watch for. Colorado State against Florida. Colorado State upset Arkansas last week. So I wonder if they will catch Florida napping after they lose to Kentucky this past week. Houston and Texas Tech on Fox. That one's going to be a pretty decent game. And here's another one. North Texas against Arkansas. I think North Texas has got a shot in that ball game for sure. Looking for more games. Keep an eye on Alabama Ole Miss, of course, on the road at Ole Miss on ESPN. Middle Tennessee against Georgia. I'm not high on Middle Tennessee anymore. Akron Northwestern, that could possibly be an upset circle. Missouri, Purdue in West Lafayette. Purdue trying to get the bad taste out of their mouth of that loss a week ago in their third straight game in West Lafayette. This past week on Saturday, bad loss against Eastern Michigan. Looking for more, of course. Ohio State takes on TCU on ABC at 8 o'clock p.m., a game that will definitely be highlighted. I don't even know where game day is going on Saturday. USC, Texas. I would actually like them to go to – I don't know if they will, though. Maybe – I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. Maybe they go to Stillwater. Maybe. Ohio State, TCU, though. We got USC, Texas in Austin, Texas. USC trying to get the bad taste out of their mouth from the Stanford loss. Very struggling offensively. And Texas also trying to show that they are not the same team that lost to Maryland, or maybe showing that Maryland isn't that bad. Washington at Utah is a game to watch for. Arizona State, San Diego State. Wonder if this is going to be kind of a sleepwalk type of game for Arizona State after a big win against Michigan State. Fresno State at UCLA. Fresno State did not pull it off against Minnesota, which I thought they would, but they got another chance here against UCLA, who's already 0-2 and lost to a Group of 5 team in Week 1, which I already referred to. And why? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and finish it up there with this week's schedule. Thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you guys next time on the Top 25 Rankings Show and possibly on other broadcasts. Stay aware of what's going on. Video coming out in the next couple of days, maybe tomorrow, maybe Tuesday, of the Week 2 highlights and recap video